Is the future of American agriculture all organic? It may be if RFK Jr. has his way and his say. That's what we're digging into in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Hey friends, The Business of Agriculture has a new sponsor. It's a company called New Fields Ag, a worldwide leader in biological planter box innovations. That's right. New Fields Ag has used farmer-focused research to create farmer-focused products. You can learn more by going to the newfieldsag.com website. That's newfieldsag.com for more information on award-winning crop performance products to help you farm better. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. Okay, I want to just point this out. I put this out as a ponderance. Yeah, a touch provocative, but maybe just a ponderance. I put it on my social media feed last week, and I got an amazing amount of reaction. By the time you're hearing this, it will have been a couple of weeks. And it was a real simple thing. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr., he's now approved. He's in this role. And I put out this statement. I'm causing my audiences to think about this topic. What if RFK Jr., as the new Health and Human Services Secretary, leads a push to force organic farming onto American agriculture? In Europe, the push is on. It would reduce yields, which would help commodity prices, while making food much more expensive. It also would cause a lot of pain in the conversion. If you work in this business, the business of agriculture, you would probably look at all that and say, yeah, and yeah. And then I went on to say, it's not likely to happen. But plan on increased scrutiny over chemical and synthetic fertilizer inputs. After all, RFK Jr. is on the record saying, quote, we could end diabetes if we switched to organic food. And I said, scientifically inaccurate, but the last 5 years should have taught you. When it comes to the government's policy, is it really ever about the science? And I put a picture on there. Holy bejesus, especially on Facebook where the loonies play. I've got 250 comments, I think it is at this point, and some of them are almost embarrassingly stupid. I mean, people that don't play in our sandbox of agriculture, and they just said some really outlandish stuff. So I want to dig into this here on my show, where most of the following, listening, and viewers are actually folks that work in agriculture, as opposed to some loon that just creeps around on Facebook from their house in suburbia. I had some woman on here with a symbol that says Black Lives Matter, that then went on to say that Damian Mason gets paid $10,000 to speak at agricultural meetings. I didn't understand the problem with that. I actually figured that should make me even more of an authority to talk about what this whole RFK Jr. push might mean for the business of agriculture. She took this as a chance to think she was insulting me or degrading me, that somehow I had no credibility because I get paid to speak at agricultural functions. I actually was kind of glad that she did that. That way, if anybody thought I would just show up for $50, now you know the price is set. Okay, all kidding aside, let's get into this. RFK Jr., if you're watching here on my YouTube channel or on Acres TV, I've got a picture of him. I printed off several articles. I've been poring over this. I did pay attention to the hearings that were the mid-February, where he got the necessary votes in his confirmation hearing in the Senate to become the Health and Human Services Secretary. And I've obviously been on the RFK Jr. thing for a while, but I want to go back to the original ponderance because it's something that we should pay attention to in agriculture. For the record, I am not anti-organic. I think any way that you can earn a living in this industry. My friend Andy Ambriel is an organic farmer. I know some organic producers. If you can charge more premium, make more margin, operate on a smaller scale in the niche that serves you, fantastic, good for you. Make all the money you can. Organic marketing, on the other hand, is oftentimes deceptive. Walk into Whole Foods and there'll be a chalkboard that says, be healthy, eat organic. Well, there's a lot of debate on this, and I can tell you that there's very little scientific evidence that says if you eat organic food, it makes you healthier. Now, if you are a person who eats organic, you might already be the health-driven person. In other words, if you hike mountains and restrict your diet so you're not overweight, you don't smoke, you don't use drugs, you don't drink, you get massages, you do stretching, you might be that person, and then you also eat organic. So maybe the whole I'm healthy because I eat organic thing is, no, I'm a healthy person, I do a lot of stuff, and I also eat organic. there could be that correlation, right? The big picture here is what I pointed out. RFK Jr. is a zealot about agriculture, about organic. And he obviously has almost no experience in production agriculture. He wasn't out there like me at age 8 feeding. When I was 8 years old and they gave me bottles of, and I had to go out and feed the bottle calves, he was going to summer camp, with the other Kennedy clan and their ill-gotten fortunes from the granddad's bootlegging operation. And they were politically connected, well off, the kind of people that had 4 homes. So he's never worked on a farm. So there's that. Secondly, he's not agriculturally educated. He did not go to a land grant school and study agriculture like the people like you who are listening and watching this episode. He is an organic zealot. I'm going to go right to that statement that he says about ending diabetes if we switch to organic food. First off, one of my detractors that climbed onto the social media page and told me that I didn't know what I was talking about said that he searched and couldn't find this. In an interview with Dr. Phil, I got to find the actual outlet, and I will, but it doesn't matter. Just you can find it. Dr. Phil interviewed, Dr. Phil, the other leading agricultural, food, and medical expert or TV personality or charlatan. Either way, Dr. Phil interviewed RFK Jr., and he says 1.5 minutes into the clip that with the diabetes situation, and it is real, we're like around 11 to 12% of our population in the United States that has diabetes. Much of it's type 2, which is used to be called adult onset diabetes. The reason it was called that in the old days was you got old and got fat, and as you got fat and less healthy, you then became diabetic. Now it's just called type 2 diabetes. We're around 11, 12% of the country that's diabetic. It used to be like 1% in the 1950s. You can say, well, we're just better at testing our blood sugar and all that. I'm not sure that's true. Look around. We're a pretty unhealthy country. That part's true. But when RFK Jr. in the interview with Dr. Phil said we could end diabetes by switching everyone over to 3 meals a day of organic food, there's just no evidence to this at all. Like many things that RFK Jr. says, it's not in any way rooted in science. He took something that is a reality, diabetes or obesity or an unhealthy America, and then conflated it, to use a media term, and then also did the activist attorney trick of relating this to this. And it's just not true. You can be organic. You could eat organic cakes that are made with organic flour. You can eat organic ice cream. You can be 350 pounds, sedentary as hell, and diabetic, and still eat organic diet. There's a lot of more factors to that. But I'm going to go ahead and unpack, to use the corporate term, some of these other things. And this is not going to be a long episode, but I just wanted to get in this because I find it so interesting. And since you're my people, the kind of wacky ass shit that people say on a social media feed, because obviously it's an anonymous source, or it's not like they're sitting at my table. I oftentimes say that. They started insulting me, my education. I had a bunch of people tell me I was a liberal. That's really an interesting thing. I'm a kind of conservative guy. I'm actually a libertarian. I found it interesting that I got called a liberal because I was questioning RFK Jr. That was an interesting thing. I had several people say, this guy's nuts. My one person that went on there that told me that I was giving myself away and my ideology when I concluded my statement that while some of RFK Jr.'s statements are scientifically inaccurate, the last 5 years should have taught us that when it comes to government policy, is it really ever about the science? Well, this person's clearly a zealot and, would have called me an anti-vaxxer or something like this. To which I, of course, say, well, are we really pretending that the government operates purely on science? Okay, in the last 5 years, the whole jab thing, if you don't get the jab, you're going to die. If you do get the jab, you'll never spread the disease. That was not true. If you get the jab, you won't get COVID. That was not true. If you wear a mask and stay 6 feet away, you won't get COVID. That was not true. Not scientific at all. Let's go back a little further. Do you remember the science around food? Yeah, the dietary nutrition guidelines that were foisted upon us starting in the 1980s, telling us to reduce our consumption of dietary fat because it would keep us skinny. Not true at all. 12% of the country roughly was obese in 1980. Now we're at 42%. And that's based on the science of American government telling America what to eat. So you'd have a hard time saying that the science has always been on the side of the government or the government's always been on the side of science. The dietary guidelines have been an absolute 100% disaster. It's made Americans diabetic, fat, and that's all happened in the last 40 years. We were a much more healthy country before the dietary guidelines for Americans that were set about by the government. Remember, they started telling us to switch from butter to Crisco and get away from eggs. Remember the science of eggs? If you ate eggs that had cholesterol, you'd get high cholesterol. It's not true at all. So there's a whole bunch of bad science that the government perpetuates still to this day. So anyway, that was an interesting one. Going through the other part, my statement. He is an organic zealot. There's no question about it. He's on the record again and again and again talking about the push for organic. I can get into some more of this. I've got another article I'll bring you some quotes from. So if you're questioning that, he does say in his hearings, in fact, he even talked about organic. And I'll go ahead and just get into this one since that was one of the things that people question me about. And then the tie with Europe. In response to questions in both hearings about how he would support farmers, Kennedy lamented that we, quote, cannot export American food to Europe. That the, quote, Europeans won't take our food. And that we need to, quote, offer farmers an off-ramp to chemically intensive agriculture so they can grow crops that they can sell in Europe. That is an actual quote from RFK Jr. Here's the thing. It's not accurate at all. Europe is our fourth or fifth biggest export market. Right now, Mexico and then closely tied or nearly tied is Canada. Mexico's our number one agricultural export country, buying the crap out of stuff. They've now almost reached what China was at China's peak in that $36 billion market range. Mexico's getting damn close. Mexico's right there. Canada's second. China is still our number 3 export country. Of course, there's a lot of things. I'm recording this in February of 2025, so we will see. Europe is either 4th or 5th. Japan and South Korea fit in there. And then we're talking about Europe as the entire European Union. About 450 million potential consumers in the EU. There's 340 here in the United States, just to give that comparison. So they're like a third bigger than us, and they're about our 4th or 5th biggest, I think 5th biggest export market right now. So when RFK Jr. says because we're not organic, Europe won't take our food, Europe won't even be a customer, that's bullshit. They are buying our food. In fact, they are the second biggest buyer of our soybeans, almost all of which in the United States of America are GMO, not even conventional. They are GMO and they are not organic. So he lies. That's the tough part about RFK Jr. When you're an activist attorney, which he is, that's all he's ever done. He's an activist attorney. The truth is not what wins trial cases, right? What wins settlements, what gets money in a litigation. Remember, he was all about suing companies. Nobody fact checks that. You're only trying to appeal to 12 jurors. Well, if you get up there and put on a good show for 12 jurors, do you really think it's truth and scientific data that wins? Remember, I've told you this before. Bayer, used to be Monsanto, Bayer, now being sued just like Monsanto was, went to court 3 times and put their attorneys up there and defended glyphosate on the grounds of science. And they lost all the time. They lost every time. They gave $11 billion settlement because they used science. So again, don't ever think that RFK Jr. and science are walking down the same aisle together. They are not. So anyway, I'll get into this and I'll dig into more of some of the insanity. Before I do, I want to remind you, if you're listening to the Business of Agriculture, I'd really like you to watch it as well. I'm really trying to get more of a following on my YouTube. I didn't concentrate on it all for 15 years. So go to YouTube, type in the Damian Mason channel. It's free. Hit subscribe. You can watch these episodes. You can watch my commentary videos that I shoot when I'm out hiking with my dogs or on my farm doing property work. Also stuff that I shoot when I'm on the road speaking at events for all that money that the Becky Hammond talked about on my Facebook page. Anyway, please do follow my stuff. I appreciate it. And also share it with somebody that can benefit from it. The Business of Agriculture is brought to you by my friends at Redox Bionutrients. Redox wants you to know that in the new year, you've got a new hope for improved outcomes on your farm. You can achieve that through high-tech plant nutrition provided by Redox Bionutrients. Redox is in Burley, Idaho. I was just there for a speaking engagement for an irrigation company. I swung by their headquarters, toured the greenhouse. A lot of cool stuff going on at Redox, helping producers take using bionutrient products and then reducing applied nutrients. It's an amazing thing. You know, we are putting out too much nitrogen. We are putting out too much phosphorus. It's not getting absorbed by the plants, and it is going into the watershed. There's going to be regulation about this. Why don't you look at alternatives to get the same amount of yield using less applied the usuals of fertility? You can do that with Redox. Go to redoxgrows.com. They help your crops maintain plant charge balance and allow your plants to focus on yield and quality and using sometimes less of the traditional inputs. Go to redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. Okay. What we found here among the insanity then, moving on. So RFK Jr., and then this permeates with his followers, and he's got a hell of a legion of followers. Obviously, they came unglued and came after me on my Facebook post. So this thing about our food is so poisonous in the United States, no one will buy it. Well, that's preposterous. We are a leading export country, obviously China. And I told you, Mexico, Canada, number 1 and 2. China, number 3. Europe, number 5, I think, after Japan. And so we are a leading export country. We export food to hundreds of countries all over the world. So this idea that no one takes our food because it's poisonous is patently false and a lie. Okay, the other part that RFK Jr. went about, the whole tie to Europe. Remember, there's a thing that happens, especially with people that lean a certain way politically. If you ever said gas is too expensive, what do you hear from, say, the environmentalists? Well, it's more expensive in Europe. You should just be lucky that it's as cheap as it is. Healthcare. We always have this thing where there's this group of people that lean a certain way politically that healthcare is better in Europe and it's free. Well, it's not free. Nothing's free. Somebody pays for it. It's just that they've perpetuated this myth that it's free. Well, now the other thing is that somehow Europe is healthier, and it's because they don't use chemistry. And one of the things then that our friend RFK Jr. went on to say, he talks a lot about glyphosate. Obviously, he made a fortune suing chemical companies, Monsanto, then Bayer, on and doing settlements on glyphosate and product liability. Find somebody that has cancer, ask them if they ever used a glyphosate in their yard, and then next thing you know, you've got a lawsuit. And that's kind of how that deal went. So he's got the whole Europe thing. I did get a bunch of angry feedback, that there was not legislation in Europe forcing farms to become organic. That is true. They do have a policy that by a certain time, I think it's in the next 5 years, their stated goal by the European Union was they're encouraging organic production. Farms switch to organic production by, I think, the year 25 or 2030. And they wanted 25% of all of the cropland to be organic. So if you keep up with how encouragement works, especially by more socialist regimes, it's encouraged, and then anything that doesn't agree with the encouragement then becomes discouraged, and then it becomes the scourge, and then eventually it becomes regulation. So there was a number of people that told me I was misstating facts. I never said it was legally required to become organic in Europe, that it was being pushed. And he's doing the same thing. And incidentally, there's a lot of folks that are saying, Damian, you keep talking about this. He's the Health and Human Services Secretary. What the hell is he going to do with USDA policy? First off, there's commingling. As I'm recording this right now, just yesterday, there was a big announcement that United States Department of Agriculture food stamp policy, or SNAP as it is, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, used to be called food stamps, basically giving money to the bottom 12 or 13% of our country. About 42 million Americans are on 41 to 43 million. It just depends. It varies by week, by month, by economy, up and down. 41 to 43 million out of our country of 340 million Americans, roughly, around 12 or 13% of our country are on SNAP food stamps. Look it up. It doesn't amount to a lot. It's like $180 a month or $200. It's not a lot per individual, but obviously if you have a whole household that are on the thing, then it's, it might be $700 or $800 per household per month. But the point is there's a requirement now being proposed that certain foods are encouraged and certain foods are discouraged or even banned from being purchased with food stamps. Everybody and her sister has a story of someone that's in front of you at the convenience store using their EBT card to buy a bag of Doritos and a Mountain Dew. And obviously, if you're the kind of person like me, you're like, hey, I don't want some kid to go without eating. If I saw some poor little kid starving, I would buy him a cheeseburger. But I sure as hell wouldn't buy him a Mountain Dew and a Doritos, right? So give the kids some protein and something they can actually put some muscle on with. But the thing is, that push, trust me, came from the RFK influence. Do not for one second think, for the first time we've actually now are putting out there on the table, we're going to restrict what you can buy with food stamps. Yeah, we did that before. You couldn't buy cigarettes. In the south side of Huntington, Indiana, the person goes in with their EBT card and buys Twinkies and then takes the change. And it used to be the thing with their stamps and then go back around and buy the cigarettes. Well, they can't do it anymore because it's a card that you swipe. But the reality is money's money and money's fungible. So they just take their non-EBT card money and use that for cigarettes. But the point remains, we've got a push now on what you're going to be allowed to spend your food stamp SNAP money on. And it is not because of Brooke Rollins. It is because of the RFK Jr. influence, I guarantee you. So consider that. Okay, let's go through and dig into this just a little bit more. Because again, I'm just contemplating. I'm just proposing. Oh, he doesn't have any real power? I think you're wrong. RFK Jr. has a fair amount of power. Clearly, what you can buy with USDA, EBT, food stamp cards is now being called into question and going to be stipulated. That didn't come about under Balsack, the last Secretary of Agriculture. It didn't come about under previous Secretaries of Agriculture. It came about under Brooke Rollins. You know it, with, again, influence from RFK Jr. So I think that he does have a big influence. Do I think that we're going to be forced into organic? No. But again, I'm pondering this and postulating it, if you will, because what if all of a sudden we start pushing for this? Now, let's get to the good part of it. When I said it would reduce yields, which would help commodity prices, we are in an absolute surplus situation right now. What if we did do a thing? Hey, we're not going to go full Europe, but you know what? In the next 5 years, we want 10% of cropland to be organic. And then we want it to be 20. And we're going to put a cap out there. By the year 2050, 1/3 of cropland is organic. You're saying that's nuts. Maybe it's not, because it would serve the purpose of controlling supply. In general, organic production is about 20% less productive, okay? You get about 80% as much. And that depends if you're talking from tomatoes to soybeans to whatever. But in general, it's more labor intensive, it's more fuel intensive to produce stuff organically. You're using less chemistry, using less synthetic fertility, using less of the tools that we have invented in modern agriculture. And it does tend to be, a lot of the greenies don't realize this, organic production uses a boatload more fuel because you got to go across that field a whole hell of a lot more to get the same output. So there's that. But anyway, that would not be bad for prices. It would not. And also, if it was voluntary. What if RFK Jr. and his incentivizing, because he talks in here at great length about we need to incentivize, he likes to push for incentivization of smaller farms, etc. We should incentivize, his quote, in the hearings, we should incentivize transitions to regenerative and no-till agriculture and to less chemically intensive agriculture. He doesn't say organic. I think one of his things in these hearings, he avoided the word organic because he's on the record like with Dr. Phil. I think he's smart enough to understand, as a trial attorney, using the word organic in a court of law to sway a jury works. Calling herbicide poison in front of a jury works. But using the word organic in front of a skeptical hearing that's being watched by people like you and me probably to me a red flag. So again, that's why his exact quote, we should incentivize transitions to regenerative and no-till agriculture and to less chemically intensive agriculture. By the way, organic does use chemicals. It's just from a approved list of chemicals. A lot of non-farm people don't know that. So I always point that out to my suburban friends, that there still is chemistry used on, and there still are products used on organic. Anyway, I don't think it would be all bad. If there was incentive, what if USDA says, you know what, if you switch to organic, and I know there are some of those, but I'm talking do it at scale. Right now, there are programs that help organic farmers, but what if it was at scale? Hey, you want to make this? Because you know what? You can always switch back. You can say, oh, we're going to lose our productive capability, and all of a sudden we won't have the food. While there's these surpluses, all right, we're going to incentivize you. It takes 2 years to lay land idle, to not idle. You can't use synthetic fertility or chemistry for 2 years. What if the plan was, we will kick in at USDA, we'll give you $300 per acre per year for those 2 years, since you're taking an offset economically to transition it from conventional to organic. Then all of a sudden the burn's not there. And then you produce organically. All of a sudden, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, we say, hey, we need to ramp up production. Okay, you can pull that organic out. No penalty. It'd be kind of like a CRP thing. Could work. I'm just throwing it out there. Would help prices and would also serve as almost a supply management device, wouldn't it? Another thing I pointed out, it would help commodity prices, but when commodity prices go higher, then food prices go higher as well. Let's face it, companies sometimes use that to their defense. Oh, well, we had to raise the price of a box of cornflakes by $1 because corn is so much more expensive. Well, the amount of corn in a box of cornflakes goes from 13 cents to 17 cents. A 4-cent move on the quantity of corn in a box of cornflakes doesn't equate to $1 rise in a box of cornflakes at the grocery store, but food companies have oftentimes done that, passing along the cost and then some, and then blaming commodity price increases. It would hurt the poorest. You would see those SNAP benefits have to go up if we did a forcible conversion, or even a non-forcible but big carrot at the end of a stick kind of an idea. If we incentivize organic production to any scale and increase food prices, there would be that. And another thing about food prices I want to point out, amongst this whole debate that, again, is instigated by RFK Jr. about healthier food and how we're in poor health, I don't think anybody denies that Americans are in pretty poor health in terms of, obesity, et cetera, and diabetes. But there's this thing that continues to go across the media that it's because junk food and bad food is cheap and healthy food is expensive. I call bullshit with an exponential number next to it on that. You can buy lettuce. You can buy bananas cheaper than you can buy a bag of donuts at the grocery store. I just was at the grocery store and I actually proved this to myself. Yeah, some stuff, organic kale or organically wild-caught salmon at Whole Foods is expensive for the yuppies. I got that. But this pretend notion that when you buy all of your groceries at a convenience store, that somehow that is cheap is all complete and utter bullshit. So that's a bunch of people that have never actually lived among poor, blue-collar, or welfare recipient people that do their shopping at Dollar General. You can buy affordable vegetables and protein. You can. And so this is all a nonsensical argument. Anyway, pain in the conversion was one of my points. There would be pain in the conversion because just like everything, if you go out to America's farms and say, hey, you've got to switch over and you've got to do it by next week or next month or even next year, well, you got to change your setup. But again, would it be that painful? When you talk about the scale of agriculture in the United States, about 80,000 farms are producing 75% of all the crop revenue in the United States. Who does the switching and how painful would that conversion be? I'm just saying it would be some pain, but I don't think it would be that long-lived because we've already got some adoption of regenerative practices. We've already got some of these things moving right along. It would actually probably put more demand on some of the supply. Organic seed, organic approved herbicides, organically approved fertility products, whatever that should be. I think it would actually create more of a squeeze there than it would the conversion. I think you give America's farmers a book, a playbook and say, you've got to become organic on 30% of your acres in the next year and a half. I have no doubt that America's farms could do that. Look at how well we adapt to most everything. So I'll get into this if there would. And I gave some other things. I want to go into some of RFK Jr.'s more outrageous statements about how the soil is all depleted and we're not going to be able to feed ourselves. Total hyperbolic, panic-driven activist attorney stuff. Before I do that, I want to tell you about my friends at GRIP. If you are a farm operation, maybe you're a large-scale agricultural business entity, you need to get a grip on things. You can do that with my friends at GRIP. GRIP is basically a program that helps you keep all of your data and your information on your farming operation. So let's say you've got a large-scale operation. You're like using Post-it notes and texting one another. You've got employees over here. You've got a different operation over there. Maybe you're an ag processing facility. Something needs fixed. You need to have a communication system so that you can keep all of your information on the operation. So with automatic Spanish to English translations, picture capture. That's right. You just take your smartphone, picture capture, and say, boom, here's this thing. Everything on your farm has like a QR code. It works out great. Automatic Spanish to English translations, picture capture. No wonder farmers across America are ditching handwritten notes and texting for GRIP. You keep your tribal knowledge and conversations on your farm at your fingertips. You do not need an app. You do not need a password. You get a grip on your operation this spring by using your subscription code and getting a big discount. Go to GRIP, GRIPP.ag. New subscribers get 20% off with the code Damian20. That's my name right over here on my shoulder. Damian20 at grip.ag. Go check it out. All right, so dig this. In the hearing, RFK Jr., if you think, oh, he's not an organic zealot, Damian, you're being crazy. No, I'm not. He's kind of crazy. He says, we only have 60 harvests left. We only have 60 harvests left. This is an absolute quote. When asked by a senator from Kansas, we only have 60 harvests left, blaming deteriorating soil health. He has said this, by the way, again and again. He has says that most millennials and all Gen Zers will, in their lifetime, experience the end of agricultural production. First raised this in 2014. It has been thoroughly busted as a myth, but he continues to repeat it. Just like Al Gore, the country's going to be underwater by the year 2017 if we don't all subscribe to his climate hysteria. Just like AOC telling you that the world's going to end in the year 2032 if we don't subscribe to her hysteria. RFK Jr. has stated repeatedly, we have 60 harvests left. They come up with this number because it's far enough away that they'll never be proven wrong. He's an 80-year-old man. What the hell difference does it would even make to him? But also, it's not true. In other words, if they say we only have 3 harvests left, then people get really, 60? Oh, okay. It becomes this complete, absolute paranoia, creating this fear, and now I'm the answer. Or more importantly, organic production is the answer. Not true at all. Let me go into some other things that RFK Jr. says. He talks about glyphosate and practicing no-till in corn and soy. What he doesn't seem to realize is a lot of practices that reduce tillage still use chemistry. Obviously, glyphosate is used when you use no-till. That's one of the things he seems to get wrong, but again, he's not a farmer. One thing I went on to say in here was that the outcome of this would be bad, but I also point out that it could be good. Like I said, reducing some supply. There could be an argument to be made that we cut back on a lot of inputs like synthetic fertility, which we know, I've been talking about this a lot, applied nutrients. A lot of it ends up in the watershed. A lot of it ends up in our aquifers. It's not all bad, RFK Jr.'s thing. Distortions to the market that are placed upon us politically generally cause a shock and it's the old rule of unintended consequences. Again, do you want the poorer people to now have no choice but to buy more expensive food? There is that concern. There is the other angle on this when you say, well, he's not really going to be that involved because he's not on, he's not the USDA person. I think that's completely underestimating his ability. He's a crafty activist attorney. He's got the family name, and he knows his way around a bureaucracy, and he knows his way around D.C., so I wouldn't count him out. A couple other things I want to point out here that would happen. Like I said, I think the biggest shocks would be to the pricing and then also to the supply chain for organic, even if it became implied. I do actually believe that his influence will create a bigger push within the USDA policy to incentivize organic production. I do believe that's coming. We only got a few % of our cropland that's devoted to organic right now. Again, it'll cause no big, huge shock waves if it's done voluntarily. Now, you got to wonder if the budget's going to be there. At the same time that he's proposing all of this and says he wants to incentivize smaller farms and organic farming, and obviously the only way to incentivize means money. How are we going to do this when Doge is going around chopping everything? I think there's going to be conflicting interests. And again, the Trump administration does very well politically in the middle of the country. That's where a lot of the agriculture happens. And I mean middle, even starting from the San Joaquin Valley on, right? Where agriculture happens is where Trump support tends to be. So I don't see this actually being something that's going to harm us without there some being incentive. But I wonder, incentive, where's that money going to come from? Another thing I want to say about this is going to be, sometimes we have had, if you pay attention, Donna Shalala, I think it was the Health and Human Services Secretary under Bill Clinton. And we're going back 30 years ago, back when I used to make a living dressing up and portraying Bill Clinton for comedy shows. So I paid attention to everything. She was the one that actually proposed that one of the things we need to do to prevent teen pregnancies was instruct masturbation in schools. So if you don't believe me, when you're done hearing this, go look it up. I know I have a lot of younger followers who are like, Damian, did you just make that shit up? No, I didn't make it up. It's true. Go look it up. There has been a history of people in these roles, and somehow at HHS, where there's some wacky, wait a minute, I just followed up a thing about masturbation wacky. Wait, where are we going on this? Anyway, masturbation wacky. Okay, here's what I'm saying. There's been some outlandish proposals before. The one that about this one is that one, of course, you'd say, well, that got shelved. I'm not sure that it did. You saw what sometimes the government's been funding. Now that we've dug in with Doge into USAID, I'm not sure that we didn't fund masturbation instruction classes. I think that there will be some money thrown at RFK Jr.'s proposals. I really do. Even though we're talking about cuts here, cuts there, because I think he's enough of a lightning rod, and he's going to, I'm telling you, there's going to be press conferences where they drag out data. They might even drag out, obese children and say this poor kid's 7 years old and he is diabetic and 75 pounds overweight at age 7, and it's because of a broken agricultural system. I think the big lightning rod is going to be the food companies. I absolutely do believe there will be lawsuits against big food, just like there were against big tobacco. I do believe that that's coming. And I don't know that he's not going to sue them as a Secretary of Health and Human Services, but it's going to be like a push that there was against tobacco. And I think it's going to be the processed food companies. I think the Nabiscos, the Mondeleses, the companies that are in the center of the store, candy companies, probably soda pop companies that use a lot of high fructose corn syrup. I really think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny that ends up being possibly litigation. It'll certainly be somewhere between litigation and regulation. Those are the things I see happening probably before there's an out-and-out push for organic. But push for organic, as I said, doesn't mean regulatory at first. It could be incentives. And I do see that coming. So that's my big takeaway. If you get bored, go and check it out. It's my my simple, I thought very simple, harmless pondering on Facebook. Hundreds of people coming after me, calling me names, questioning my career, my education, telling me I'm nuts. It's actually kind of amusing. You got to have broad shoulders to do what I do for a living, but I know that you appreciate me doing what I do. Anyway, thanks for being here. Check out my friends at Redox Grows. Check out my friends at grip.ag, and then my new sponsor, New Fields Ag. And also, if you like what I do here, the show that I created with my friends at Extreme Ag in the Granary, it's back at my farm, at my on-farm tavern. I hang out, sit down with the guys, have a drink, and we talk about real ag issues from the personal to the professional to everything in between. So go check it out. Till next time, thank you very much for being here. Stay tuned, because I'm telling you what, this is going to shake things up with RFK Jr., I think more than we have seen for a while in the whole food and agriculture ecosystem in the United States of America. Till next time, I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by my friends at New Fields Ag. American-made, American-owned, focusing on the success of the American farmer. That's New Fields Ag, offering a complete lineup of high-performing biological products for you, the American farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more.